Well, it is the first day of Rift Rivals, but we're not talking so much about the games right now because I'm joined right now by Robbie Douek, who is the president of Refresh, which owns many things, including, of course, Origin, who is competing on stage today. Of course, this coverage is brought to you by Alienware. So first off, I'm happy to chat with you a little bit because I have been familiar with your company for quite some time, but I do not fully understand how it is structured and how Origin fits into it. And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of the people that are watching at home. So maybe you can explain to me sort of what Refresh is and how it fits in the esports industry.
Thanks, and a great pleasure to be here in LA. So Refresh, we're a media and entertainment company, and obviously we have a tournament series on one side, but then we have our teams business, and we're obviously privileged and delighted to work with Origin. So we have Origin, and we obviously have Astralis as well on the Counter-Strike side of the things. And we have a group of people really focused on making that team's business and our teams perform to the best of their ability. So that's, generally speaking, very simply the structure.
Okay. And outside of the team side, what else is Refresh involved in?
So we have a tournament series that we take around the world globally called Blast Pro, and obviously we have a content division too. So we're producing a bunch of content editorial that we take out and put on social channels to really give the consumers that storytelling that we think is so incredible around what is happening in esports. And so that entertainment angle is super important and resonates across everything that we do.
And we were just talking a little bit before this, but Blast, you're in LA right now, you're going back, but then you're returning in just a short time because Blast is actually in LA soon.
Yeah, we could not avoid being in the entertainment capital of the world, right? Yes. So we were delighted to bring Blast Pro. It's called Blast Front Row, actually. We're bringing that here in 2 weeks' time. So very excited to have that format here. But obviously, I'm more excited about what's going on this afternoon. Looking forward to an Origin success story over here. And as a brand itself, we're very, very excited about the work that Becky and Martin is doing and the team itself. They're really showcasing what we're all about. You said earlier, how do we structure our company, and we think about our business and our team's business as a performance business, and the infrastructure we put in and around them to make sure they're performing to the best of their ability. They're eating well, sleeping well, thinking well, training well. That's hugely important for us. And so, obviously, I'm not a gamer myself, but when we talk to other businesses, we talk about that sports element to it. And I spend my life talking about how these guys are real athletes. The Danish Prime Minister said it himself, so I can't say any better than that.
Do you consider Refresh to be a primarily European business entity?
No, I think we're definitely now global.
Okay.
We certainly started in Copenhagen, a very Scandinavian feel. Origin brings a dimension which is obviously got that Spanish roots and Latin American culture to it, which is great. But now the tournament series going global this year, we've been in Sao Paulo and Miami and now in LA. I think we're definitely a global business.
Well, one of the reasons I asked is, and maybe it's still worth asking given the roots of your organization, your business, but for a long time it felt as though North America had a bit of a business advantage in the esports industry, given that, especially with the US, it's pretty much a single entity and single market, whereas it seemed like for a while it took Europe a while to catch up, and we saw that reflected sometimes in the salaries of the players, and North America being able to, especially in League, import so much European talent. Do you feel like that has changed now, or do you think that it's even, or how do you view these different markets?
I mean, I think that the European market is certainly in a space now which is on a par performance-wise. The teams are performing brilliantly. The infrastructure in and around the advertising markets is obviously different, right? The American advertising market and sponsorship market is way bigger than it is in Europe. But the digital economy, say, for example, in the United Kingdom, is the second biggest digital economy in the world. So that should reflect in the ability for us to work harder and better with players in the European sector. So I think there's a catch-up going on. I think there's a roster of talent, which is fantastic. I think that the education that's going on at a grassroots level to enable Europeans to play and perform is also super important. And we can't discount that. And I think that's having a massive impact on success stories.
How do you currently see the esports space from a monetization perspective? Because there's been a lot of conversation out there in terms of comparing, for instance, the average dollar amount that a traditional sports fan spends every year compared to an esports fan. It does feel like we are behind. While investment right now looks really strong, monetization maybe hasn't caught up with it. I'm curious if you have any opinions on that at the moment.
Yeah, it's a great question. I spent years working in mobile, and we had those Mary Meeker reports that talked about consumption on mobile and investment on mobile being down here. I think we see that obviously there's a huge consumption going on, and yet the brands aren't quite there yet. It will follow. It is changing. We're seeing a bigger level of investment happening in certain sectors, from certain sectors. But I think that we're in a very good space for that now.
Looking at sort of some of the other big organizations, especially in North America, that looked to dive into esports in multiple ways, not just on the team front, but also in other areas. I'm thinking, of course, of the optic parent company Infinite. Echo Fox has had some interesting things with their parent company. How do you see, or what do you think of those organizations and what they've done, and sort of the issues that they ran into that have seen them have a bunch of upheaval? And do you worry at all looking at refresh and the possibility of, hey, maybe we are doing too much at any given point in time?
Yeah, I mean, always focus on what you think you can control and where you think you can succeed. I mean, when we look into the US and we look at the businesses that are succeeding, I think there are some that have done very well in the merchandise space and produce clothing lines which are streetwear now that is very strong. We want to be careful of not running into those pitfalls. But the challenge with the ecosystem at the moment is there's so much opportunity. I can walk into any place and talk to 100 people who want to talk about esports, and you've just got to work out where you spend your energy and where you spend your efforts. And then I think that also relates to hiring the right people. So and really giving a lot of focus to hiring the right people in and around our infrastructure from the right businesses. That makes a massive difference. And when we started getting that right at Refresh, I think we started seeing reward. So very focused on hiring people from the entertainment sector, from traditional sports, and that's made a big difference to our business.
Given what I was just mentioning with Optic and Clutch as well, do you think that there's a good chance that we are going to see a time of consolidation happening at all in the industry in the near term, as the companies that haven't been able to figure out profitability or the revenue that they're looking for? Do you think there's a chance that we're going to start to see more consolidation?
I mean, I think we'll see certain brands and businesses come to the forefront more than others. I think we'll certainly start seeing leaders in the space. And I hope to also see that we don't start seeing companies appear one minute and drop off the next. I don't think that's good for the ecosystem. I don't think that's good for what everyone else is trying to create. And I think that will start happening. I think we'll see a consolidation. I mean, esports has gone through a lot of change. It will go through further change. So I think excited to see that happen.
I'm pretty curious with Refresh. Do you look at the different organizations and the tournaments that you run as being distinct entities, or are these like a play where, hey, you can go to a brand and you can say, look, if you come in right now, I can give you this, and also events? Like, is that sort of the play that you're looking at as you invest into multiple different sections of the industry?
I mean, we certainly treat our pieces of IP very differently. The infrastructure in and around the teams is wholly around the teams. The production and the operations that goes on to producing a tournament series is in and around that. We have done some commercial deals that span across, Origin, Astralis, and Blast. HP Omen is one of those. So that's a success story. Economies of scale. It works efficiently. And that's good for the business. That said, what Origin's great at, it may not have the strengths that we have from Origin may not exist on our Astralis, and certainly there's no replication on Blast. So we have to be clever about how we position our staff and how they work, and they work effectively for that.
Obviously, I'm not looking to pry into your books or anything like that, but how do you feel about, we mentioned beforehand you'd been there for about a year and a half. How do you feel about the organization in terms of a revenue and profitability standpoint so far? Yeah,
I think we've, as I mentioned before, I joined a year and a half, and I think we've come a really long way. We've got some global brands on board. We've got global broadcasters picking up our streams on our tournament series. We've got some really premier brands that are working with us. So we're monetizing really well. Our team's business is going strong, and our tournament series is effective. It's challenging rolling it globally. There's no qualms about that. But I feel like we're moving certainly in the right direction, and we want to see a hockey stick growth, and we're trying the hardest to make that happen for our investors and our support. Are there plans at all to expand beyond the existing investments that Refresh has right now? So we're in a good place with what we've got. We're very focused on making sure that our assets perform and achieve. We think that our IP can, perform in other areas as well, and we'll watch the space. We're very keen on making sure that that we put the right infrastructure and support behind our teams, and we're doing that. And watch the space.
The last question I have for you is, I feel like especially in 2018 and 2019, we have seen kind of a blurring of the lines between the streamer space and the esports space, right? Oftentimes people use these two terms interchangeably, but you have people like Ninja and Shroud who perhaps in certain cases in the past have been assigned to a specific organization, but now have kind of struck off on their own and are brands in their own right. Do you see the esports industry and the sort of streamer space, influencer space being linked in this way? Do you think that it's okay to kind of lump them in whenever you're talking to brands and investors? Is this something that Astralis or Origin or any of the other brands that you're associated with, do you think that that will be something that they will have a bigger hand in the future?
I mean, I think if I was to summarize what I think you're saying, I actually think that those streamers become brands in their own right, and they become, brand entities that have been born off of the back of esports. I think that's great. I think the more superstars we can create, the more global brand ambassadors that we have in esports, that becomes even better for the household, right? The average household will be able to relate to that. So I can only hope that that actually continues in that space. And if stars are born off the back of playing and competing and winning, and if we can get some of those coming out from Origin and Astralis, then even better.
Any concern though that if you guys can build a star and then they leave, as we saw with Shroud, who was with Cloud9, Ninja with Luminosity, there's kind of like you build this individual up and then, hey, maybe they don't need an organization anymore, they just go sign with an agency directly.
I mean, that happens in traditional sport, in entertainment, in the music industry. We've seen it many times before. The bigger the star becomes, the more hungry they are for commercial deals. But I think that we would need to look at the ecosystem and say, well, actually, that's building from the ground up. The next star will come along the next day, and you can work with them. Ronaldo's a huge superstar, right? David Beckham, and they've come from somewhere, and I think that's okay.
Well, hey, thank you so much for catching up with me here. It's rare that I get a chance or the privilege to talk about the business side of the industry, and a lot of my audience, I think, maybe is not as interested in it, but I know that there are a lot of those out there, and people, I think, don't have as much of an opportunity to talk about these days. So thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you back in LA in just a couple of weeks. Hopefully you can avoid any kind of European weather and come back to LA as we enjoy this. Yeah.
It's balmy conditions. It's lovely here.
Yes,
so
exactly. Well, thank you so much for the interview. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things esports right here on my YouTube channel. Hey, thanks so much for watching that interview. I wanted to give a special call out, by the way, to the live hotline league that we did here. We had Doublelift and some of the EU coaches on, a bunch of the casters. It was really fun, and I think actually some great discussion. So that's over on my YouTube channel. That was made possible, by the way, by Alienware as well as Intel. So thank you so much to them for making that happen. And you can check out their stuff in the link in the description, alienware.com/Travis, and code Travis10 off.